I have watched mountains for longer than people have measured themselves. I have seen slopes that give fruit and shelter become dark with ash and fire in the span of a single day. Once, beneath one such slope, a city lived with a calm and ordinary brilliance. Narrow streets where merchants argued over prices, baths filled with steam and conversation, frescoed rooms that caught the afternoon light, and vineyards that rolled toward the blue of the bay. That city was Pompeii, and for a few hours on a day the world remembers, the mountain that stood guard over it became the instrument that would freeze a whole human world in suspended motion. Pompeii had been a place of small routines and loud human detail. People rose before dawn to roll loaves into ovens. Children ran between alleys and the amphitheater. Shopfronts opened to the street. Bowls of oil and garlands of flowers set out to attract trade. The scent of fish sauce, the weight of heavy bread, the scrape of a potter's wheel, the echo of feet over stone, these were the textures of daily life. Years earlier, an earthquake had already shaken the city. Walls had been mended, mosaics reset, and life had resumed with the stubborn continuity of habit. The mountain watched. When the mountain broke, it did not do so like a single sudden explosion. It moved in stages, and its work unfolded as if rehearsed, an atmospheric drama of sound and stone. First came a column of steam, ash, and pumice, a high, convecting plume that tore into the sky and darkened the sun. For hours, fragments of rock and glassy pumice rained down, coating roofs, filling streets, and draping the city in a pale, abrasive shroud. The fall came silently at first, but then in weight, pressing on wooden beams and tiled roofs until the structures began to bend and collapse under the burden. People fled, stumbling through streets that were rapidly filling with gritty dust, hair and clothes dusted in ashen powder, voices muffled by the thickening air. Some left in haste and survived. Others did not make it. And then, as the day wore on, the worst arrived. Fast-moving surges of hot gas and ash that swept down the mountain slopes with little warning. These currents traveled at terrifying speeds and with temperatures sufficient to kill within moments. They flowed like dark, invisible waves that swallowed courtyards and alleys and did not cease until the city lay sealed under meters of compacted material. Heat, suffocation, and the weight of debris ended lives that had been interrupted mid-motion. A woman clinging to a child, a man bent over a threshold, bodies gathered as if still holding on to some small vital hope. In their instant of ending, they became preserved. Preservation is a strange mercy. The ash behaved not only as an agent of destruction, but as a blanket that excluded air and slowed decay. Where it covered organic life, wood, food, cloth, was often carbonized rather than consumed, leaving outlines and textures that would surprise later eyes. Frescoes that might have faded under sun and rain were held in the shelter of rubble. Mosaics were buried but not erased. The compacted layers of pumice and ash formed an anaerobic vault, and inside that vault, a moment of Roman life endured in mute detail. When the city was opened again, centuries later, the silence that archaeologists encountered felt less like emptiness and more like the echo of a crowded day. Whole streets emerged carrying the trace of ordinary gestures. A baker's shelves revealed loaves flattened and blackened, their scored tops still visible. Thermopolia, the fast food counters of antiquity, showed the jars that once contained stews and wine. Graffiti scribbled on walls, the private notes of citizens, survived as the city's everyday voice. Announcements, insults, jokes, the names of lovers and candidates for office. Houses preserved their charms and mean cruelties alike. Atriums with their impluviums, rooms that displayed lavish erotic paintings, modest courtyards with potted plants and the scorch marks of lamps. Archaeology brought Pompeii back to the light, not through a single moment of discovery, but by patient, layered work. The first major encounters in the mid-18th century were excavations that revealed walls, mosaics, and statues, and began the slow unfolding of a city once thought lost. The technique that made Pompeii's humanity most visible came later, where voids remained in the hardened ash, the empty spaces left by decomposed bodies. Archaeologists poured plaster into those cavities. When the casts were revealed, they captured the last registered posture of a person with shocking intimacy. The angle of a wrist, the tilt of a head, the way a garment bunched. These plaster figures transformed abstract numbers into palpable lives, each cast a quiet testament that folded death, grief, and the ordinary into a single form. Pompeii did more than deliver objects and bones. It returned a social world. The stratification of Roman life, its commerce and cuisine, the play of public and private. Frescoes and household objects showed how homes staged identity. Political graffiti exposed local power plays. Graffiti about gladiators and entertainers proved the appetite for spectacle. A city's daily textures, a baker's tools, a house's decorations, the public baths, together made a biography of a society that otherwise might be summarized only by law codes and elite literature. Here, in the preserved debris, the silent and the loud of antiquity spoke at once. There is also a modern story woven into that biography. Pompeii has been a continuous project of excavation, conservation, tourism, and debate. It inspired artists and thinkers, reshaped notions of the ancient world, and forced early archaeologists to confront the ethics of digging up lives. The city's treasures have drawn millions, the price of which is wear and stress to the very walls that make the place sacred. Conservationists now argue over how to balance public access with preservation, how to protect pigments that bloom when exposed to humidity and light, how to slow the erosion of plaster, fresco, and structure under the thousands small assaults of weather and foot traffic. Every act of revelation becomes a responsibility to steward what we have been given, to record and repair, to resist the temptation to possess rather than to understand. To stand among the remains is to be quiet in a specific way. The visual richness of painted rooms and the crisp geometry of mosaics used to be read as window dressing, objects of aesthetic delight. Today they are also evidence, pigments that reveal trade networks and technologies, coins that tell us where people were connected, seeds that show diets and seasons. Scientific analyses of pollen, of trapped proteins, of isotopes in bones have drawn layers of biology into the narrative of a city. And yet, despite all this detail, there remains an essence that is not measurable: the abruptness of loss, the intimacy of frozen moments, the contrast between human routine and geological force. How to live with that contrast? One answer is humility. Pompeii reminds us that the stability we assume is contingent on factors far larger than our plans. It reminds us that culture and craft can be transitory in the face of geological power, and conversely that catastrophe can, in its own way, preserve the very things it sought to destroy. It asks us to read the small things with care: a bread oven, a scratched inscription, a child's toy, because they are the threads that form a human tapestry. It also asks us to think about voice and memory. The walls of Pompeii speak with the layered accents of a crowded city: official proclamations, rude jokes, lost prayers. When we listen, we are reminded that history is not only the record of the great, but is also an aggregation of everyday acts. Archaeology lets us reconstruct scenes, but it also teaches a different kind of closeness: the recognition that each person who moved through those alleys had interior life, expectation, fear, hope. The plaster casts are not macabre curiosities. They are the last literal impressions of a people, stubbornly insisting on presence. Time prefers to be patient. It covers, it reveals, it erodes, and then it offers a chance to know. Pompeii is not a museum of catastrophe alone. It is a mirror that returns the look of our own fragility and ingenuity. It shows us that ordinary life, cooking, trading, laughing, arguing, is worth recording because it is where humanity is most itself. It also shows that in the face of forces we cannot entirely control, we have one choice left: to remember and to learn. We walk among those streets now, with the weight of many centuries between our feet and theirs. We touch stones polished by hands long stilled and read messages scrawled in the margins of a city's day. There is grief embedded in the ash, and there is also a strange consolation that the smallest details of a life, the curve of an amphora, a name scratched on a wall, the imprint of a loaf, can survive the cataclysm and speak to us across time. To listen is to accept both the tenuousness of ordinary days and the persistence of memory. In the silence that follows the ash, the city continues to teach us how to value the mundane, how to honor what endures, and how, in preserving the past, we also hold a mirror up to ourselves.